The most well-known Jack tales would be Jack and the
Beanstalk.
Thank you. Okay, but this isn't Jack and the Beanstalk. As I said, I've read it, but I've never told it. Obviously, it's got a cat in it, though. Yeah, and I'm not a cat person. Yeah. It just so happens that young Jack suddenly found himself short of money. So he put on his hat and started walking down the road and decided, well, he'll have to find some way of earning money, look for a job. And by, he came across a nice, great big stone mill, and he went and approached the miller and he said, would you happen to have a job that I could be doing? And the miller looked him up and down and thought, well, he looks a strong lad. And he said, well, yes, I could give you a job. He said, I pay a fair wage. You can sleep in the mill, and your job will be to grind the corn. So Jack thought that sounded fine. But, said the miller, I have to warn you. There's a bit of a haunting going on in the mill. Every time I've employed someone to go and work in the mill, they've never lasted more than the first night. I've found them dead in the morning.
Saves on superannuation.
He's got to bury them though, doesn't he? Well, Jack decided that, he said, no, look, I don't believe in hauntings, and I don't think a haunting's going to upset me. After all, he said, I'm a young boy and I'm hungry and in need of a place to stay. So, no, I'm quite happy to take on the challenge. And so the miller handed him over the keys to the mill, and Jack went inside to make himself at home. And by, an old man with a long white beard comes up, and he says, hello, Jack. And Jack looked out and said, oh, hello there. He said, do I know you? And this old guy says, no, I'm a stranger. And then Jack says, but how do you know my name? I just knows you because I've seen you. Anyway, he said, Jack, he said, I've got this great big bag of corn I need to be ground down. And Jack said, that's fine, come on in, my first customer. So he grounds the corn down into a nice fine meal, just the way the old man wanted it. And he handed it back to him, and the old man said to him, oh, I've got a present for you. You've been so generous in doing the job with me. That's really good. I've got this knife. It's made of silver, and it's very sharp, but I'd like to give it to you. Well, okay, said Jack. So the man went off with his ground down corn, his meal, and Jack was quite happy. So he goes back to sorting out his mill. And as the night was coming down, the miller comes in and said, well, he said, I thought I'd bring you over some nice meat so you could make yourself a fine stew. Everyone's entitled to their last meal. So Jack sets himself up his cooking pot up there, and he makes himself this nice fine stew. And it's got dark outside. And he's looking around and he's just about to start eating his stew, and a black cat walks in. He doesn't think much about that. Then another black cat walks in, and another. All in all, 12 black cats came into the room, each one bigger than the last. By the time there was 12 in the room, Jack was starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable. And the biggest black cat, the last one to come into the room, walks right over to him, sits in front of him, looks him up and down, and looks at the cooking pot, looks him up and down, and then says, sop, doll, sop. Takes its paw, puts it into the cooking pot, and starts tasting the stew. Well, Jack was really shocked by this, but he turned around and he said, you do that one more time, I'm going to cut off that paw.
Oh.
The cat just looks at him. looks him up and down, looks at the cooking pot and goes, "Sop, doll, sop!" Puts his paw back into the stew. Starts licking. Jack whipped out that knife that he'd been given. Chop! Off comes the paw. Yow! Went the cat. And all of the cats suddenly broke into howls and screeches and quickly left the room. Jack turned around to look for that paw that he'd just chopped off. But it wasn't a paw. It was a lady's hand with a ring on it. So Jack wraps it up in a cloth and puts it aside, and he thought, "Oh, tell the miller about this in the morning." Enjoys his meal, goes to bed. When the morning comes, the miller decides he better go and see about Jack. But he doesn't knock on the door because he just walks on in. And he sees Jack's lying there, sound asleep still, snoring. So he was obviously still alive, and he woke him up. And then Jack related what had happened during the night. And at the end of the story he was telling him, he unfolded the cloth and showed him the hand. And the miller said, "I know that hand. Come with me, Jack." So he went into his house, and his wife was still tucked up in bed. And the miller says, and she says, "Oh, I'm not feeling the best. I'm not getting out of bed today." And the miller says, "Show me your hand." And she puts out her right hand. And he said, "No, I want to see your left hand." No, and she's hanging onto the bed, and he pulls back the covers, and there is a bloody stump. And at that point, he realised that his wife was a witch. And all of a sudden, 11 other women came into the room because they all realised that they'd been found out that they were witches. So Jack and the miller raced outside, bolted the door, set the house on fire, crackle and burn, got rid of all the witches.
What else could you do?
What else would you do? That's right. Yes, and then after that, Jack stayed on, but the miller reminded Jack, he said, "That knife you've got, that silver knife, only a silver knife would have been able to injure a witch and actually break that spell. And it was my wife or her witches that were actually killing everyone I employed to work in the mill." So Jack stayed on and worked with the miller and made some money. And the miller, well, he married again someone who wasn't a witch. And after time goes by, Jack decided that he was sick of working for a living and being in a mill, so he puts his hat back on and walks off down the road. That's my story. So it's actually called Sop, Doll, Sop. And because I was reading up about the folklore part, and they were assuming that the doll was meant to be the poor, but there's no other story or no other relationship or anything in folklore to say that it is the poor, but that's the actual story, Sop, Doll, Sop.